Okay, this is recording 4. Martin is saying goodbye to his cousin Seki, who helped him get stuff for school. Right. I don't know how I can repay such kindness, I said, but I promise you I will. Seki smiled and said, focus on your studies, Martin. That's all we want in return. I barely slept that night. After the first rooster crow, I jumped up. My new uniform was draped over my trunk. Slipping into the long pants and proper shirt and jacket that morning made me realize that my life was truly about to change. I felt ready. My trunk was too heavy to carry to the bus station, so my family accompanied me to the main road, where I hailed a small tut-tut taxi. I hugged my younger brothers and sister goodbye. Before I got in the vehicle, my mother placed both hands on my shoulders and stood on her toes to look in my eyes. Work hard, she said. Don't do crazy stuff there. My father put his arm around me and said, you'll do just fine. You have made us so proud. I will miss you, brother. Nation was the last to say goodbye. And I you, I replied. All of you. As the taxi took off, I realized I wouldn't see any of them again for months. I felt sad as I watched my family, still waving, disappear. Then I realized I'm doing this for myself and for them. I was starting a new chapter. In Nyanga, a van collected me and a few other students. I quickly found Rabbit, who had saved a bed for me next to his. I knew you'd be back, he said. This meant we shared a cabinet too. His side had several photos pinned to it. One of his family visiting on Parents' Day, another of his girlfriend back home. I started unpacking and took out the photo of Caitlin wearing her sun hat. Wow, Rabbit said. Who's that? I pulled out all the photos and started telling Rabbit about Caitlin. So she's your girlfriend? Rabbit asked. She's my best friend, I countered. By then, a small crowd had gathered around to look at the pictures of Caitlin, her family, dogs, house, and her new car. She looks like a movie star, Bonaventure said. His bed was on the other side of mine. Is that how you got those Nikes? Asked Gregory, another dorm mate. The questions kept coming rapid fire. Finally, I put up my hands and said, okay, guys, enough. I have to unpack. When I was done, I'd adhered all of Caitlin's photos to my locker with tape borrowed from Rabbit. From then on, I was no longer known as the Bean Eater or the kid from Tsukuba, but as the new guy with a gorgeous American girlfriend. I didn't argue. They would never understand our bond. Besides, it raised my cash on campus. All right, this next chapter is Caitlin, March 2001. And just my own little side note, it has to do with boys and stuff, so, anyway. I was hanging out at the food court in the mall when I spotted Austin. I knew him through Heather. They were dating even though he went to Penridge, a rival high school. That meant the other 3 boys he was with probably went there as well. One of them was really cute. My friend Amy saw me staring and said, I dare you to go talk to him. Propelled by the thought of kissing the tall, lanky boy with the sandy brown hair one day soon, I stood up and heard Amy say, no way, as I walked across the court. The boys must have heard, too, because they turned toward me as I approached. Hey, Austin, I said, what's up? Not much, he said. I was waiting for an introduction, but couldn't stand the suspense. I turned to my new crush and said, hi, I'm Caitlin, and you're really cute. Personally, I think that's insane, but anyway, okay. His other friends all busted out laughing, including Austin, who said, your move, Damon. Damon's cheeks turned red as he looked away for a moment before turning to me to say, okay, well, you're cute too. I found a slip of paper and pen in my bag and wrote down my number. Call me, I said, and then walked back to my friends, who each high-fived me when I sat down. I cannot believe you just did that, Amy said. I couldn't either. My friends and I popped into Aeropostale to try on the skinny cargo pants that were all the rage. There, I fell in love with a backless halter top and a leather miniskirt I dreamed of wearing on my first date with Damon. I hoped he'd call. As we rode the escalator up to the next level, Amy spotted Damon and Austin below. Caitlin, there he is, she said. Hey, Damon, I shouted as all my friends laughed. He looked up at me, and I blew him a kiss and winked. I'd always been outgoing, but even I was amazed at my forwardness. I think it's obnoxious. Okay. That night, I was in my room when my cell phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. Caitlin? I recognized the gravelly voice and felt that same feeling again. He called. We talked on the phone for over an hour that night. I told him I was about to turn 16 and that my dad had already bought me a car. I've actually seen it, he said. I dropped Austin off at Heather's last week and I noticed it in the driveway. You drove past my house, I said. Your driveway looks like a parking lot, he responded, and your car stuck out. I got goosebumps. Well, now you know where to come to pick me up, I said. Damon showed up the next day. My mom and dad already knew he was coming over. They were very cool about my having boyfriends, as long as they got to know them. Nice to meet you, young man, my dad said, greeting Damon at the front door. Damon and I went to the mall to meet up with Heather and Austin, both of whom were excited that we could now double date. I was too. Damon was different from the guys I dated in middle school. He was more mature and sensitive. I think she's too young to date, by the way. Okay, sorry. I understood why when I met his dad. He had MS and was in a wheelchair as a result. That meant he needed full-time care to do anything from eat to go to the bathroom. Damon's mom took care of his dad and basically let her kids fend for themselves. His parents turned the downstairs den into their bedroom and let Damon and his older brothers take over the second floor, which meant they could drink beer and smoke pot in their rooms, and their mom never really checked on them. Again, that is totally wrong. Drinking and smoking pot, very wrong. I'm just reading the book. Okay. The first time Damon offered me pot in his house, I was mortified. My mom had recently found Richie's bong in a brown paper bag in his underwear drawer. She took the bag out to the garage, smashed it with a hammer, and then put the bag of broken shards back in the drawer. I kept waiting for Richie to get yelled at, and so did he. The look of fearful anticipation on his face remained for days. She never said a word, which was somehow worse than being grounded. I knew better than to bring pot or any paraphernalia into my house, but I thought it was cool that Damon could. Again, not cool, not correct, not good. I also liked that I could tell him anything. We were in his room hanging out when I first told him about Martin. At first I was worried that he, like everyone else, would think Martin was my boyfriend. After I told Damon the whole story starting from the first letter to the phone call with Mr. Sampudini, he smiled and said, "That's so cool." Okay, sorry about that chapter, but ugh. Okay, now back to Martin. April 2001. I settled into my school that Tuesday and waited for confirmation that Eloise had sent the funds. Everything was happening so fast, I did not have time to write Caitlin with my news. I wanted to wait for everything to be settled first. The fees were due by 5 p.m. When Wednesday morning arrived, I woke up nervous. At breakfast, the deputy headmaster called several students' names, including mine. We were all instructed to report to the bursar's office. This felt too familiar. I was the first in line at the bursar's office, desperate to know the status. The deposit did not arrive, he explained. There must be a mistake, I said. Regardless, it was due yesterday, he responded. I said, "May I call to see what the holdup is?" The bursar gave me a week to sort things out, so I reported to my first class that morning, confident I could. The teacher entered the room, and all the students took out their notebooks and got quiet immediately. Mangwanini class, the teacher said. That was the only Shona spoken for the next 45 minutes. Classes were taught in English, and all of my teachers were brilliant. I felt like a daughter. I soaked every word up and wrote each one down verbatim. By the end of the day, my hand was aching. So were my arms, as each class came with its own textbook. When that first teacher handed them out at the start of the class, I was in awe as students wrote their names inside the covers. I held back from raising my hand to ask the question, straining at my lips. We get to keep these? That evening, I lugged 7 textbooks back to my room and carefully placed them in my locker. There are thousands more books at the library, Rabbit said, and you can use them at any time. No more sharing or borrowing or sneaking around, I thought. This was my heaven. At the end of my first week, I saw how challenging my new school was. My classmates were smarter and more diligent than any I had encountered before. I decided to go study at the library, like I did at Tsakuba. I thought I could get ahead that way, and so I was shocked to find that I was not the only one with this idea. Kids didn't brag about sneakers or music or money. Instead, they'd say, I stayed up until 4 a.m. studying. The harder you worked, the cooler you were. I knew I could work hard and keep up with the rest academically, but not if the money didn't arrive. Eloise sent me a message on Friday. He needed a few more days. I spent that weekend feeling enormous dread, knowing at any moment I could be kicked out. Monday morning arrived, and all of the A-level students were called to an assembly after breakfast. The headmaster spent 15 minutes giving everyone a pep talk. This is your chance to show the world how smart and dedicated you are, his big voice bellowed across the wooden paneled room where we all had gathered. I was standing in one of the back 2 rows with my class. The upperclassmen were in the front 2 rows. Everyone was dressed for inspection, which came next. The headmaster walked from one student to the next, eyeing each up and down, and whispering notes to the deputy, who followed him with a book. If your shirt was wrinkled or your hair was a mess, you would get written up. Stand up straight, Rabbit had coached me earlier that morning as we all walked toward the assembly. And don't look him in the eyes, just look ahead. I did as I was told, and though I made it when no notes were taken and thought I had made it when no notes were taken in front of me. But then the headmaster resumed his position at the front of the room and bellowed, Jonathan, his hand. Lovemore Muganda, the headmaster shouted. Another hand shot up. And then he said, Martin Ganda. Electricity coursed through my veins as I lifted my arm in the air. Come see me in my office, he said, before dismissing the rest of the students. As I walked down toward the office with Jonathan and Lovemore, my head was spinning. How could I raise this money? I had to stay. I couldn't imagine going back to Tsakuba now. I was the first to go in. You said your cousin and Harar was going to pay Friday, but nothing happened, Mr. Muzwazi said. I have protected you as long as I possibly can. It would not be fair to the other students if I kept allowing this to happen. I understand, sir, I said. Please allow me to make one last call. I will tell my cousin if we don't receive the funds today, then it's over. Fair enough, he said. I went directly to the secretary who placed the call. When Alois heard my voice, he said, Perfect timing. I've just sent the money this very minute. This is such great news, I said, as all the tension drained from my body. I was sure I would be taking a bus back to Samba Singles this evening. Alois explained that it was more difficult than ever to sell stocks these days, as the market was on the verge of collapse. I could help with the deposit, but I won't be able to do anything more, he said. You'll have to find another way. I said I would, and then reported the good news to the receptionist. Please let the headmaster and bursar know to expect the deposit today, I said. I did not mention the rest of the tuition. I first had to figure out how I could get it. That would take some time, and I did not feel I could ask Caitlin for this much money. It was 20 times more than my school in Tsakuba, and she was already supporting my family. It was too much. I decided to just throw myself into my work. Perhaps if I did well, the headmaster would make an exception. All I knew how to do was study, so I focused on that. By the end of the semester, my grades were good, and I had never once gotten called out for a messy room or rumpled jacket. I even got the highest grade on an early math test, but I knew that wasn't enough to keep me in school. The semester was coming to an end, and I still hadn't figured out a way to raise the rest of my tuition. I kept focused on my work and prayed for a miracle. Okay, that is the end of, not the chapter, but this is the end of my time, so I'll be back again. I hope you like the book so far.